An interesting development to come out of the Israeli spyware maker, the NSO group. We've talked about them on the show before. We've talked about how there was this big scandal where you had this Pegasus software that was being used to target individuals, and the companies say, well, it's just used to target bad people, and we only sell it to really nice people. And it turns out that's not the case, and it was being used to target journalists and activists and dissidents, and being sold to a lot of really bad countries that don't have great human rights records. And now Apple is pushing back. They're saying that they're going to sue the spyware maker. They're seeking to block its access to iPhones. Basically, they want to put laws in place that will stop NSO from ever using Apple software for their services. An interesting development. There's a lot to unpack here, because I know we talk a lot about like blanket surveillance, mass surveillance. That's quite different from targeted surveillance. Targeted surveillance, I think, if you want to catch a really, really bad person, targeted surveillance is the way to do it. The fact is that at the moment we have this dragnet capture of everyone's data, and it doesn't matter if you're innocent, all this stuff's being collected about people. There's no warrants associated with it. It's terrible. And it's in this permanent database stored forever attached to our identities. So that's kind of what a lot of people in the privacy community push back against rather than this targeted aspect. But Apple is pushing back on the targeted aspect, because they said NSO Group just can't be trusted. They've been selling this to really bad people. They've been using it for really bad reasons, and they don't want NSO to have access to any Apple devices anymore. So interesting to see what's going to happen through this. I'll throw it to the group for your thoughts so we can dig into it some more. But Jen, what's your thought on all of this?
Yeah, I want to bring up a quote from the story. So an NSO representative said that pedophiles and terrorists can freely operate in technological safe havens, and they provide governments the lawful tools to fight that. And that just comes back to this narrative that we speak about so much on the show. When we talk about surveillance, these companies we're targeting the pedophiles. But Apple had a very similar narrative when they launched their surveillance software that was going to go through your iCloud content and search through your photos for child pornography or evidence of child sexual abuse. So I thought that was really interesting. I always wonder what the real intentions are behind some of these lawsuits, and I hope that Apple's are genuine, but I do just want to flag that they had a surveillance product that they launched. I think they launched it, or they were talking about launching it.
They walked that back.
Did they walk it back? Okay.
Yeah.
So they did walk it back. I just also wonder about their intentions. I hope that they are, genuine, but Will, I'll pass it up to you.
Yeah, just kind of taking a step back. It's interesting and fascinating to see teams like Apple, who are just best known for having like these very simple products that work and like sleek design, simple stuff like that. They're operating this whole other world where they're fighting people who are trying to use spyware technology on their applications. Like, this is something that normal retail investor would never interface with. They wouldn't know about it, but Apple is working on their behalf to try to figure this out. But to Jen, your point, I hadn't even thought about that the fact that Apple would prefer to do its own surveillance and not have it outsourced by a competing company coming in and taking it over in some sort of sense. And that's, in essence, kind of what a lawsuit would be able to do. Say like, hey, you can't like invade our software. This is our software. If someone's going to do this, it's going to be us. And I think to Naomi's point earlier, like, there is a lot of surveillance applications out there, and this has been a huge headline over and over again during the year. I wish Ben was on the show to kind of talk about this right now. But there's been a lot of instances where, Ben, shout out to you. There's been a lot of instances this year where these spyware applications have been used by foreign governments to track down and hurt people. And in the case of the Saudi journalist who died, I think in 2019, that was even like the repercussions for that tracking software were death for somebody. So definitely like huge stakes online, even though somebody just, like most people aren't interfacing with this. They know about an iPhone and they know about Macs, but they don't know what's all going behind the scenes with like this spyware stuff. Maybe I'll throw it up to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just a few caveats about Apple's spyware. The way that they ran it, or the way that they proposed to run it, I mean, first of all, it was pretty opaque at the start, as everything with Apple is, but details eventually came out that it was understood that this would all be happening client side, which is very different from data being sent off phone and being, sort of sifted through in a centralized database where they have access to it all. The idea was that it would be sifted through on your device and on like servers where your stuff already existed, so like iCloud. And if it was on the device, then only like a hash would be sent out, and so people wouldn't be looking at your actual photos. It would be a hash, but it was so problematic. There were all kinds of issues with this. For example, like there were all kinds of mistakes that could be made with these hashes. You could have a hash that looks nothing like child porn, but it would be triggered as this is a child porn image, and it would just be like a picture of static. Because that's the weird thing about AI, is that sometimes it's just like way out in left field, and sometimes it's not great at actually identifying things. But I will just say that Apple has been fantastic for privacy and bringing it to the mainstream, because it's one thing to tell someone, like, in order to have absolute privacy, you need to download a Linux kernel, you could be running command line code, and you need to, have a Faraday cage around your house. And like, people get privacy fatigue. And what Apple did was they brought it to the masses. They encrypted devices by default. They have been such an amazing company for privacy. A lot of people lost trust in them when they came out with the proposal of the client-side scanning of photos. But then they come back with something like this, where they are fighting again on their users' behalf. And they said in the quote, if you do this, if you weaponize our software against innocent users, researchers, dissidents, activists, or journalists, Apple will give you no quarter. So it seems that they really are going to come down hard if this central company, spyware company, continues down there. So we'll see what happens out of this lawsuit, but definitely an interesting development.